Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Mealy, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Mealy. Happy to be here today with Shane Spielvogle, and Shane is the Executive Director of North Huntingdon EMS and Rescue. Thank you so much for being here today, Shane.
No, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Yes, we talked to you just around the beginning of 2022, and we were talking about the COVID trends ticking up then, particularly because families were getting together and more people were inside. So give us the latest information. What are you hearing? What kind of trends are you seeing?
Yeah, so COVID is really is sticking with us. We thought, everyone thought 2 years ago, a couple of weeks to stop the spread, and maybe we would make it through the woods pretty quickly, but it's really become part of the fabric of what medicine has been doing for 2 years. The most recent data that we have is after a lull in infections and patients that we have seen who we believed to be either exposed or infected with COVID-19, over the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've seen a resurgence in the number of patients we are encountering with symptoms consistent with a COVID infection. Now, the good news is, despite the uptick in exposures and just the overall number of people that we're seeing, the severity of illness that we are seeing is not as severe as it had been about a year ago. That's great news. As we know, the hospitals were very much overstretched about this time last year and over Christmas of last year. And right now, everyone seems to be in a pretty good place as far as capacity. Severity being down means that not as many people are being admitted. Not as many people are dying from this right now, it seems like. And I do have to contribute a lot of that gain to the success of the vaccination programs in the state. We talked our last time around about how important it was for anybody who was eligible to be vaccinated to do so. And since we've been together, we've been able to become boosted, if not once, maybe twice, based on your eligibility criteria. And so I know a lot more people have become vaccinated in the last few months to a year. And to me, that's a great way to stay as safe as possible.
Now, when you're talking about transporting patients, are the COVID protocols still as intense as they were for your staff? Or, how does that work now?
Luckily, here at North Huntingdon EMS Rescue, the vaccination rate of our staff is almost 100%.
Wow.
And so with that, we are able to still take precautions. We still wear the high respiration mask, the high quality filtering masks, gloves, gowns when appropriate for, patients who are truly sick. So I don't know if medicine will ever get away from masking during all patient contacts. We've been wearing a mask for all patient contacts for, my goodness, over 2 years now. And I don't see a place or a time in the near future where that will go away. So we're still going through large amounts of masks, large amounts of gloves, gowns. We've been fortunate to get equipment drops from both FEMA and PEMA through Westmoreland County that have been filtered to us, and through the goodwill of just the general citizenship who have taken it upon themselves to drop gloves and masks at our door unsolicited. And so it's been quite the ride, quite the challenge the entire time to make sure that we have the appropriate gear to keep operating safely.
Well, there was a time when you couldn't get it.
Yes.
And so you feel like it's a little bit more accessible now?
Absolutely. I think with the, remember, we're 2 years into this. It feels like it's been 20 minutes. I feel sometimes it's just so fast. The Defense Production Act that was put into place, we were fortunate enough to get wind of a program through the Ford Motor Company where they had changed production in one of their factories to make surgical masks. Filled out some paperwork online, sent an email, and a month later, a box of 18,000 masks that were stamped with the Ford logo showed up. And so, yeah, absolutely. The national strategic stockpiles from the federal government have been mobilized and distributed out through the county level emergency management agencies. And so the problems and challenges we had at the beginning and in the early stages of this COVID pandemic are not what we're seeing today. We are in a much better place.
Even with the supply chain issues that we're seeing, fortunately, but you probably have other supply chain issues, right, that you're seeing, but not with the medical gear that you need.
No, personal protective equipment right now is thankfully plentiful. And so that is not a challenge.
Yeah, you just, have to pay double for gas or...
Right. Gas is much more expensive. Yeah. Patient care continues to be a very expensive thing to provide efficiently and safely. Medical gear, hardware updates for the ambulances. It's, from one challenge that is eased, another is always risen up. So that's where we are.
So when you're seeing the transports, are people still calling 911 because they need a transport because they have COVID, or has that slowed down considerably?
That has slowed down. The people that are calling 911 now are, it seems to be, folks who are at home and become symptomatic with either COVID or what they feel might be COVID. And let's not forget, we are coming out of flu and allergy season, and sometimes people are sick with other things, but they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And they feel like they can't manage that safely at home, and they would like to go to the hospital. And so they end up dialing 911, and we come and get them.
How's your staffing going? Because I know, well, maybe you could explain to people what's happening, the challenge in healthcare staffing right now. Why don't you take them through that, and then we can talk about specifically North Huntingdon EMS.
Sure, of course. So staffing globally in all industries and networks and jobs is always a challenge for everyone. I truly believe that through this pandemic, there is no industry untouched by a staffing challenge. And also very few industries unchanged in some way. I have my brother, who's an executive for a healthcare company, used to go to the office in the city of Pittsburgh 5 days a week. And now he works from home 4 days a week. Downtown doesn't even exist anymore. They made all the office spaces into open concept meeting rooms where if he needs to meet with somebody, he can book a room, go into the city, do it, and then come right back out. Healthcare is no different. There's a shift in, number one, people wanting to do healthcare work, and number two, where they want to do it. Hospitals are absolutely in that group. The recruitment of nurses and support staff and even physicians and physician extenders is challenging. It takes a special kind of a person who wants to suit up in a mask and a gown and go take care of very sick people all the time. Healthcare workers, we knew what we were getting into when we joined the industry. I just realized, actually, this week is the 25th anniversary of me graduating nursing school. So,
wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I actually didn't realize it had been that long until I did the quick math. But the profession that I came into in 1997 as a young nurse was very different than the profession that we are all in today as healthcare professionals. And so it's a challenge to recruit and retain. There are vast opportunities for healthcare people with a certain skill set to work from their home remotely, managing different items. And because of that, those are incentivized to be able to do that. If you think about it, for the better part of 2 years, our kids were at home being hybrid schooled or homeschooled, and childcare became a supreme challenge for many families. They were unable to, number one, find, or number two, afford that healthcare. And so if you were a person who had a skill set that allowed them to work from their own home, where their children are with them and they're doing school in one room and you're doing work in a different room and everyone's together, I could see where that would absolutely be very enticing to somebody who was in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure the same goes for EMS, emergency medical personnel. It's a hard job. I mean, you're working terrible hours, you're lifting people, you're, always faced with crisis. And so how do you maintain that staffing?
So we are North Huntingdon EMS. We're lucky. We have several ways we combat that challenge. The number one is through recruitment and retention of new staff. We have relationships with the University of Pittsburgh and a few other educational centers that are the source for some of our younger personnel who are using emergency medical services as a bridge to their next career. They are, for an example, right now on our roster, we have about 26 paramedics who have come out of the PIT program, which is a 4-year undergraduate degree. In their junior year, they become state qualified paramedics. They come and work for us as a paramedic for a year, maybe 2 or 3, while they are preparing to go on to their next training, which might be, example, this year, we lost 3, and 1 to medical school, 1 to physician assistant school, and another who went to the London School of Business. So, but with losing those 3 staff members, we've replaced them with 2 new paramedics just coming out of their training program who will start to work with us and take those roles. So currently for North Huntingdon EMS, we're able to maintain that full staffing model because as we lose staff, we backfill them with new providers just coming out of school.
That is amazing that you have that pipeline. I mean, and in most cases, hospitals don't. Are you seeing the crunch though? So you're staffed and you get the patients to the hospital and then you wait, right? Because it doesn't matter where you go, there's a crunch.
Yeah, the emergency departments are amazingly overwhelmed. Not to the level they were maybe 6 months or a year ago when, we really had the COVID crunches, but like everybody, they have staffing issues, and they're doing everything they can to make sure their work environment is safe for patients and for the physicians and nurses, but also trying to maintain that staffing level to keep throughput going. So it's very difficult from a hospital perspective. And before this life, this career, I worked for a major Pittsburgh health system in a variety of roles. And, if you go to the emergency department at any hospital and are seen by a physician, that physician needs to get you to a bed upstairs because you have to be admitted for one reason or another. The challenges don't end right then. It's a matter of making sure there's room upstairs for you, which often means being able to discharge a person in that room out either to their home or to another level of care outside of the hospital. And so there's so many moving parts. I know all of the hospitals in our region, the Westmoreland County hospitals, the Allegheny County hospitals that we deal with really are truly every day trying to do the best that they can for patients and families. And so, I applaud them. I empathize with their situation because we were in that. I did that life for many years. And as EMS, we do feel that. So we are taking care of the sick and injured. We're getting them into local hospitals. And there are times when we have patients on the stretcher who are waiting to be placed into a bed in the emergency department that we have to wait a little bit. And that's typically okay. We can understand that. And we work with them to make sure that we're taking the appropriate patient to the appropriate hospital. And so that we're not taking a patient somewhere that may not be able to treat a specialty condition that they have, which will require an additional transfer, via either air or ground ambulance. And so we are really just trying to make sure that we do what's best for patients and families, just like the hospitals are.
And you should be commended for that, for sure. I'm talking with Shane Spielvogle. He's the executive director of North Huntingdon EMS Rescue. So stay with us. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. We'll be right back.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm Jennifer Mealy here today with Shane Spielvogle. He is the executive director of North Huntingdon EMS Rescue. He's been taking us through the trends that he's seen in COVID over the last 2 years, all the supply chain issues, staffing issues that it has caused. You know, it's an unbelievable time for healthcare. I think the crisis, and it just sometimes doesn't seem to let up. I was, just on a plane to Florida not too long ago, Shane, and it feels similar with the airline industry. They tell us that, people now are just so intent on traveling because they haven't traveled in so long. There's no lulls, there's no downtime. There's no ability to relax. And part of that also is because, you're always out there pounding the pavement for funding. I know you get, a chunk of dollars to make sure that EMS Rescue works in North Huntingdon Township. Most of that's from the payers. So you're, sort of at the mercy of insurance companies and reimbursements and how long they take and what they reimburse. So then you turn your hat, as a nurse and as executive director. Now all of a sudden you're a fundraiser. Isn't that right?
We wear many hats, and one of them absolutely is fundraiser, community activist, community awareness, making sure that the people that we serve fully understand the scope of services that North Huntingdon EMS Rescue provides. And so you're right. Our budget is primarily made up of reimbursement from emergency and non-emergency transfer of patients. What people may be surprised to know is that if an ambulance goes and examines a patient, and for whatever reason we don't transport that patient to a hospital, there is no reimbursement. That's a unfunded kind of service. And that happens, there are car crashes that we're sent to that people aren't sure if somebody's hurt. And so we get there and nobody is, and that's okay. We go to somebody's house because somebody has slid down to the floor and just needs picked back up. And we certainly help with those because they're not injured. There are others where people, maybe I don't feel well. I'm going to call an ambulance and see what they say. And we go and, hey, listen, thanks for coming over and taking a look at me, folks, but I don't feel like I want to go to the hospital today. So with North Huntingdon, though, the way that we do our business is, like I said, through reimbursement.
Yes.
The other thing that folks may be truly surprised to know that is that for every dollar we bill insurance agencies for services provided at a cost that is set forward by the federal government. So the pricing scale for what we do is not something that we just make up on our own. But for every dollar that we bill out to insurance companies, we only recover from them about 60 to 65% of that dollar, 60 to 65 cents on the dollar, which means, and there are so many things, Jen, we could do a whole other show about reimbursement rates and the way that the state reimbursement for care has not been increased or adjusted in over 25 years. As costs continue to rise in astronomical fashions in all facets over time. In fact, some of us are traveling to Harrisburg on June 6th to go and speak to some of our local reps and participate in an awareness kind of press conference. But so there's a shortfall, right? We have here at North Huntingdon, there are 19 full-time staff members, 18 of which are clinical. And then we have another dozen or so part-time casual staff. And we still do to this day have a small cadre of volunteers who come and on their availability, come and do time with us as providers. And so the last way that we make up, well, there's three ways. We have the billing, which it says about 65% of what's billed out comes back. The North Huntingdon Township does provide us with some funding and other means of support, for which we are very grateful. We realize that not every local town or municipality supports their EMS in the same way that ours does. And we're very lucky to have what we have. But then the final piece of that puzzle is the annual fund drive. Mm-hmm. And so that is a program that started many years ago, and people listening may already receive a solicitation in the form of a letter from a local volunteer fire company or their local EMS agency. And I really ask that you take that letter seriously. It's very simple to look at it and think, well, this isn't a bill. Those guys and girls get tax money. They're doing well. Their trucks are new and shiny, and their gear looks to be squared away. So I think they're all right. But I'll tell you, maintaining all of these things, all of these service lines, this level of readiness that we do is difficult. Maintaining staff means that, like any other industry we talked about before, keeping wages competitive, the benefit package competitive, uniforms, boots, breathing apparatus, heart monitors. We just made a $200,000 investment in a new stretcher system for all 4 ambulances.
Wow.
Which, EMS today, one of the biggest things was our backs mm-hmm. were always torn up because we were lifting people from the ground into the ambulances. Well, our stretchers today are powered. And so they lift the patient from the ground to a loaded position. And then the ambulance actually has a mechanism where it grabs that load and pulls it into the ambulance by itself, taking all the lifting completely out of EMS. But those things all take a tremendous amount of dollars. So for North Huntingdon EMS, North Huntingdon's a growing township. We're building new houses, and it's wonderful to see a lot of new families coming in. We send our flyer to about almost 19,000 addresses in the township. Now, it's only in North Huntingdon Township. And from that, about 30% of those come back with a donation. And we are very, very thankful, again, for every bit of support that we get from the township. And, we realize that everyone's dollar is very important to them also. So we offer benefits to the subscribers based on their subscription, meaning that if you are a subscriber to North Huntingdon EMS, if you should need an ambulance for one reason or another, that we would take $100 off of your final bill after insurance and everything else is applied. Wow. So for some folks who have reason, maybe because of a chronic illness or whatever, to use an ambulance a few times again through the year, we can offer them some significant savings on what they do. And those dollars, that final piece to our funding puzzle, really just makes it so that we can continue to do the work that we do here for the visitors and residents of North Huntingdon.
Oh my goodness. And what I think of is you don't think about it until you need it. And then these well-trained people show up to your home when there's an emergency, and they have all the equipment they need to save the lives of you or your loved ones. And, there's something to be said about that, right? I mean,
I think it's a confidence thing, having both of us been around the healthcare arena for quite a while and understanding that the perception of the care that you're receiving is almost as important as the care that you're receiving. If you walked into a health clinic or a hospital and the equipment seemed to be out of date or not well maintained, and the staff members there did not appear to be kind of up on their education and really high functioning, high quality, efficient, and safe practitioners, I believe your mindset would already go to, hey, listen, this might not work out very well for us. But being able to provide the Rescue 8 staff with updated equipment, making sure that their training is current and, the most recent things that are out there on the market is important to me, because I'll be honest with you, I live in North Huntingdon Township. My parents live in North Huntingdon Township. And so I have a lot of friends and family that live in and around the area. And I want to make sure that we take care of all of them in the best way possible. And so that's really where we take our mission seriously, to provide a high quality care that people can feel confident with when we show up.
And you do it so well, and the staff is so great, and that really centers around your leadership. And after we saw the last week the tragic events that unfolded in Texas, I mean, that training is so important. You just never know, right? I mean, I'm sure that scared you to the core when you saw that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, to be completely frank, I'm a father to a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, mm-hmm. and I'm the husband to a first grade teacher. Mm-hmm. So that struck home in a way that was different, mm-hmm. And has been different. And so, with our local school district here, Norwin Schools, I have to give them all the credit. They have a very robust school safety program. But even before that, Westmoreland County has been, as a group, the EMS agencies, planning and preparing and drilling for unfortunate violent acts, natural disasters, really anywhere that numbers of people can be injured and in need of a systematic care. When you're taking care of one or two people, that is a much different animal than whether you have a large number of people injured from whatever the source. And so those things, often when you have especially younger staff members who, like we talked about, coming out of the pipeline, getting into this career just maybe a year or less into it. And we just had crew meeting every morning. So this morning's crew, when they came on at 7 a.m., we were discussing this. This is the first time they really kind of looked at that and thought, Lord forbid, this could be something that I would have to respond to at some point in my career. Mm-hmm. And how would I handle that? And what would we do? And then in the moment that you're doing it, you're absolutely engrossed in your work and doing it as best you can. But then the after effects come in. Mm-hmm. So, did I do enough? Could I have done more? Did I push in when I could have pushed in? Did I, was I? And so EMS has taken as an industry, as a profession, has taken the idea of provider self-care very seriously.
Yes.
And, I, like I said, I'm an old nurse now, but I've had several ex-partners who have committed suicide. Oh. And so, we know that this career, healthcare careers, and especially anybody who works in something emergency medical, takes a toll. And so we make sure that there are support mechanisms for the responders. And so Buffalo, New York, Texas, and of course, we could certainly list off many more beyond that, but we are doing our best to make sure that we are as prepared and equipped as possible, both as an independent agency, as ourselves singularly, but then as part of the county and, quite honestly, the regional EMS system.
Right, the providers in general. Yes, and you are. I mean, it's and we're blessed that you're prepared for something like that, and just hoping that it never touches this community. So Shane Spielvogle is the executive director of North Huntingdon EMS Rescue. Shane, real quick, web address, social media where people can donate.
Sure. So you could make a donation directly through our website, which is www.nhems.org. Mm-hmm. There is a site on there. It's a credit card, bank card. Our physical address is there if you'd prefer to send a paper check. And you could follow us on social media. We are currently live on Twitter and Facebook at NHEMSR.
Shane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was really great to see you again.
And thanks everybody out there for listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. HJB. HJB. HJB.